can consider this part two of my video that I posted just this morning talking about William Lane Craig and Ravi Zacharias and Steve Baughman. So let's just go a little bit of background from the previous video. So Steve Baughman sent a letter to Craig recalling how he'd had an interaction with Craig and Craig's wife, Jan, 20 years ago that really impacted him positively. And while he was still a skeptic and an atheist, that had an ongoing positive impact on him. And that's what's recounted here. And then Craig provided his response, thanking Steve Baughman for providing this explanation of this positive impact. And note in particular that Craig says he was thrilled because of the way Jan's simple act of compassion, that is giving Steve Baughman a hug at the end of the exchange, touched your heart. That he's really positively impacted. And now he has come to realize what a positive impact he had on Steve Baughman 20 years before. So that's all really nice. But then the issue that I focused on in the last video was what he then says. And again, we return to this section. He says, I have a related story of my own that you'll find interesting. Shortly before his demise, Ravi Zacharias and his wife Margie invited Jan and me to breakfast at a local restaurant. During the course of our conversation, he complained to us about how you, that is Steve Baughman, were going after him, trying to bring him down. So the way that Ravi Zacharias is framing this is that Steve Baughman was unfairly attacking him. That is Zacharias. And then he warned me, Bill, he told me that you're next on his list. He's going to be coming after you. And then Craig says this, I braced myself emotionally for the predicted onslaught, but it never came. Here's the question. So Craig clearly believed Zacharias that this was in fact true, that Steve Baughman had told Zacharias that he was now going to target Bill Craig and destroy him the same way he had destroyed Zacharias. And then what's really important is what he says there at the end. Now I know why. That is, now I know why the predicted onslaught from you never came. The fact that after 20 long years, you should reach out to me suggests you are still open to Christian belief. Now, there are two possible ways to interpret this, neither one of which I believe reflects well upon William Lane Craig. The first is to say that what Craig is saying here is, well, so first of all, actually, let me preface this before I talk about these two different ways of interpreting this. Okay, so the thing to keep in mind is that Craig is saying he has some new information now. Having read Steve's letter about their positive exchange 20 years ago, that has provided him now in 2025 with new information about how to process Ravi Zacharias' claim about Steve Baughman shortly before he died. Okay, so when Craig says, now I know why Baughman never went after him, it's because of some new information Baughman has presented to Craig. And the new information in context is pretty clear. What Craig is referring to here is the fact that Baughman revealed to him that 20 years before he had this transformative encounter with Craig and Craig's wife, Jan. And he says the fact that after so many years, you should reach out to me suggests you are still open to Christian belief. So that is his commentary on now I know why you didn't attack me, as Ravi Zacharias said. And that's the end of it. Now, there are two possible interpretations, however, of this. And I'll start off with the more charitable interpretation of what Craig is saying here. The more charitable interpretation would be that now that he has received Baughman's account of this very positive exchange that he had with Craig 20 years before, Craig now reflects upon Ravi Zacharias and believes he was in fact lying when he claimed that Baughman was going to go after Craig. That's the first interpretation. The perhaps less charitable interpretation is that Craig still believes that what Ravi Zacharias said was true, that that Baughman was planning to go after him and that he told that to Zacharias, but that Baughman ultimately decided not to go after Craig because Craig had positively impacted him 20 years before in the conversation with Craig and his wife Jan. Now, neither one of those is a good explanation. For one thing, both of them entail that Craig continued to believe Ravi Zacharias was telling the truth up until 2025 when he got this letter from Baughman. So there has now been on the public record for 4 to 5 years, depending on how you want to count things, extensive record of Ravi Zacharias being a habitual liar and a fabulous, so somebody who embellishes truth and somebody who outright lies, who falsifies things, who maintained a secret life. A person like this should have zero credibility. So the fact that after all of this evidence about Ravi Zacharias, maintaining massage parlors, he was maintaining his own massage parlors where he would sexually groom and abuse women. He's keeping all that quiet and using money from our ZIM ministries or our Zim ministries as part of this. It is unbelievable. The fact that you would give any credibility to a person like that is, to my mind, deeply concerning and evidence that the individual who continued to believe Ravi Zacharias even after so many years and so much evidence against him was indeed fatuous or naive. And I believe deeply so and culpably so. But it's worse because after Ravi Zacharias was exposed, that would show and clearly did show that Steve Baughman was not out to get him on some unholy crusade. Rather, the Guidepost investigation into this sexual predator and liar fully vindicated Steve Baughman. It fully showed that he had good intentions throughout, that he was simply trying to expose this liar predator that people like Craig and other Christian apologists continued to prop up for years, despite a growing amount of evidence going back at least at 2017 and the Lorianne Thompson allegations of sexual grooming. Not to mention, even before then, years before then, the ongoing pattern of Zacharias continuing to lie and make fabulous claims about his CV and academic credentials. All of that was public information. None of that seems to have been a red flag to people like Craig. So once in 2021, 2022, the evidence is overwhelming that Baughman didn't unfairly go after after Zacharias, but was performing a public service in identifying important evidence that the Christian community needed to address, evidence of him being a liar and a predator. People like Craig should then have said, oh, well, then obviously, if he was a liar and if Zacharias was a liar and Baughman was telling the truth about him, why would he continue to believe up until 2025 this claim from Zacharias that Baughman was going after Craig? It's just inexplicable. Now, with that in mind, I want to take a look and just offer a response. One of the people who offered a comment to me posting on my video this morning. Okay, so this person, Very Myth Pictures. So I'm just going to call them Very. So Very says, just because Ravi lied about some things doesn't mean he lied about everything. It could have still been true that Steve would try to unjustly dig up dirt on Craig. So Craig might have still had reason to be concerned. But now Steve has regained Craig's trust. So why post such melodramatic nonsense with such a misleading title? This is shameful. Actually, I think what is shameful is your response. It's true that just because a person lies about one thing doesn't mean they lied about everything. But if Ravi Zacharias was lying about himself and clearly about misrepresenting Steve Baughman's intentions, claiming that Baughman was out to get him unfairly when in fact Baughman was doing a public service to identify and call out predator and a liar who was exploiting women and manipulating the entire evangelical community. Baughman was a hero. If we already know that, then that provides excellent grounds to challenge the way that Ravi Zacharias then presents Baughman to Craig. Once you know that Baughman was faithfully criticizing Zacharias and that Zacharias was a liar and a fabulist and a predator, you now have excellent grounds to reconsider any claims that Zacharias has made about Baughman, including claims he made about Baughman allegedly going after Craig. So it is indefensible in 2025 for Craig still have to believe Ravi Zacharias and only to have begun to change his mind about Zacharias in either of the two ways that I described when he got a letter from Steve Baughman presenting his take on a very positive exchange from 20 years ago. So what this person Verity is doing is downplaying Craig's own fatuousness, his own willingness to continue to trust somebody who is obviously, by all the public evidence, a habitual liar and a predator and a fabulist. And that is itself shameful. And to my mind, I mean, there's a certain irony here that just because you've got a great intellect and you have a PhD in systematic theology and philosophical theology, I guess it doesn't make you a good judge of people's character. And it doesn't necessarily give you wisdom in how to identify when people are telling the truth and when you are being lied to or manipulated. And that's maybe the reality, but it's also deeply concerning because apologetics is not just the matter of presenting abstract intellectual arguments, it's a matter of holistic credibility. And when people like Craig continue to believe a fabulous liar, predator like Ravi Zacharias about comments he made about Steve Baughman, even years after he's been fully discredited, that just goes to undercut your general credibility as an apologist for the Christian faith.